In the early hours of February 21st, 2008, a quiet home in Minden, Nevada became the center of a case that looked simple at first glance, and then slowly revealed how wrong first impressions can be. Alyssa Oxley had built what appeared to be a stable, loving life. She was married to Ben Oxley, a devoted father, and she'd stepped fully into the role of mother for his young daughter, Alyssa. Their family wasn't perfect in a staged, social media way. It was the kind of normal that feels safe, routine, familiar, the kind of home where nothing is supposed to happen at 3:30 in the morning. But that night, Ben was found dead in bed from a shotgun wound to the head.
911, address of your emergency.
I was sleeping. I turned on the light to wake up my husband.
Melissa said she had been asleep beside him. She was covered in blood, but physically unharmed.
Is he awake?
No, he's dead.
He's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So you think somebody came in and shot him?
Yeah.
Where's your husband at?
No, lay down, lay down. I'm so tired.
Who are you talking to right now?
My daughter.
Just stay in the bedroom with your daughter, okay?
Please, get somebody.
Okay, while I'm talking to you, my partner is dispatching units out, okay?
We immediately called code 3, lights and sirens, driving as fast as we can to get to the scene.
When police arrived, they moved through the home cautiously. The lights were off, and the silence felt unnatural. The kind of quiet that makes every hallway feel longer.
I was thinking, am I going to see a deceased person, or am I going to encounter someone pointing a gun at me?
The front door was wide open, but there were no obvious signs of forced entry. No smashed windows, no kicked-in doors. And to investigators arriving in the dark, the scene carried an implication they couldn't ignore. If someone was killed in their bed, and the person next to them didn't wake up, then either the killer was already inside the house, or the killer was the person in the bed. Melissa became the immediate focus. As they cleared rooms, they found a teenage boy, Craig, under blankets in a bedroom, waking to the shock of armed officers shouting commands. Craig was Melissa's younger brother, living in the home at the time. His presence complicated everything. Another person inside the house, another possible suspect. Investigators found shotgun shells in Craig's room, and it didn't help that he was the only one in the household known to have an interest in firearms. For a moment, the case leaned toward him, but tests came back with no gunshot residue on his hands, nothing to support that he had fired a weapon that night. His story held. He had been asleep. With Craig slipping out of reach as a suspect, the case snapped back to Melissa.
Why somebody shoots him, I can't see anything.
I don't know. I don't know.
Sometimes people know more than they want to tell or share. And I really need it all.
I don't know.
It's the worst feeling thinking that you're getting blamed for your husband's death.
To detectives, it felt impossible. A woman lying next to her husband doesn't just sleep through a shotgun blast, doesn't wake up covered in blood, and somehow knows nothing. They pressed her. They looked for cracks. But they still had a problem. Suspicion isn't proof. And without physical evidence tying anyone to the trigger, they couldn't arrest her. Then the investigation uncovered something that made the rumors outside the police station turn into something uglier. A life insurance policy. Hundreds of thousands of dollars that would go to Melissa if Ben died. Even if she claimed she didn't know about it, the existence of that policy gave people what they always reach for in cases like this. A motive they could understand. A simple explanation. A villain they could name.
Everybody in town just assumed that his wife murdered him while he was sleeping.
She's the prime suspect. She's the wife. She was laying in bed with him. It doesn't make sense that she wasn't shot.
And while Melissa remained under suspicion, Alyssa's life was ripped apart. To protect the 6-year-old, a judge sent her to live with her biological mother, Dawn, Ben's ex-wife. In theory, it was a return to where she belonged. In reality, it was a return to someone she barely knew anymore, in a home that didn't resemble the stability she'd had with her father and stepmother. Around her, the accusations continued. The adults talked, the rumors spread, and the loudest voice insisting Melissa was guilty came from Dawn herself. But Alyssa didn't believe it.
She told me that she thought my stepmom killed my dad. that night. Yeah, I didn't believe it, but...
Even at 6 years old, she understood something the adults didn't. The love she'd lived inside wasn't fake. Melissa didn't feel like a stranger pretending to be a mother. Melissa felt like family. And that belief, stubborn, quiet, unwavering, became the one thing that kept this case from locking onto the wrong person forever. Because Alyssa hadn't been asleep that night.
I woke up and heard this creak at the front door. I heard it and I just looked out and I saw someone walking in.
Do you know who they were?
I don't know who it was.
She just recognized it as a person that was looking in on her. That was the first time we now had somebody else possibly involved.
That changed the shape of the entire investigation. She had heard the front door, and she had seen a person moving inside the house. Not a dream, not a vague feeling, a presence. Someone who didn't belong. This statement did something powerful. It cracked the assumption that the killer had to be Melissa or Craig. It opened the door to a third option, the one investigators had been missing, an intruder who wasn't a stranger. And once you consider that possibility, one person suddenly stands in a different light. Dawn.
I couldn't think of anybody that would want him dead, besides Dawn.
With Ben gone, Dawn regained custody of Alyssa and escaped the burden of child support payments. Investigators began to look deeper into her history and her life at the time. Patterns of instability, neglect, addiction, and trouble with the law that had contributed to her losing custody in the first place. They also zeroed in on the man around her, James, a boyfriend with his own record, his own history, and an alibi that started to fray under scrutiny.
She stated that she was at the house the whole time, and that was all that she knew.
Who was at the house?
My son, Devin, and James. And James is my best friend's son. He hangs out there a lot.
At 4:30, who else is still up?
James was still awake with me. And he just told me to go to bed.
Are you romantically involved with James?
No. Him and I are just really good friends.
Did I kill Ben? No. Do I know who killed Ben? No. Did Dawn kill Ben? No. Do I know anything about the murder? No.
Were you and Dawn in any way involved in the planning of the death of Ben?
No. I'm looking you in your eyes. I did not kill him. James. I had nothing to do with him.
Dawn and James claimed they had been home all night, but surveillance told a different story. James was out early that morning. A small lie, maybe, but in investigations like this, small lies are rarely alone. When one piece is false, everything attached to it becomes suspect. Still, even with pressure building, detectives were stuck. They had suspicion again. They had inconsistencies. But they needed something that could move the case forward, something solid enough to pull a child out of a dangerous home if their instincts were right. And then, in a turn that shattered the remaining secrecy, another voice came forward. Dawn's teenage son, Devin.
Throughout the night, she kept going that she wants Ben dead.
He told investigators what he had witnessed in his mother's home. The anger, the resentment, the obsession with Ben, the belief that Ben had ruined her life by taking Alyssa and forcing her to pay support.
And James, just out of nowhere, kept saying, you know what, I'll go kill him for you. Just give me the word and I'll go kill him for you. And she just kept saying, I just want him dead.
His account didn't just suggest motive, it suggested intent. And once that door opened, the entire structure of the case began to collapse inward on Dawn and James. Under mounting pressure, James eventually turned.
She was always ranting and raving about Ben. I said, I'll take care of Ben. And she said, I don't want you to take care of Ben, I want you to kill Ben. I said, you want me to kill Ben? She said, yes.
And what he described was the nightmare version of what Alyssa had hinted at from the beginning. That the figure in the house that night wasn't a stranger from outside the family. It was Alyssa's own mother. Dawn had been there, inside the home, in the dark, close enough to be seen by her child.
And as I'm walking down the hallway, Dawn stops in front of an open doorway, which wasn't Alyssa's bedroom. And I'm almost to the master bedroom, and I turn around and see that Dawn's not following me.
I woke up and heard this creak at the front door. I just heard it and I just looked out and I saw someone walking in.
The scary dark figure standing in Alyssa's room was her own mother, Dawn.
Dawn had asked if I'd kill Alyssa too, and I agreed to it. I don't know how long I was standing there. Something happened, it jolted and I pulled the trigger. I shot Ben. I killed Ben.
James admitted he was the one who pulled the trigger. And in that confession lies the most chilling part of the case. After killing Ben, James reportedly considered shooting Melissa too, silencing the only adult witness who could contradict whatever story they planned to sell afterward. But he hesitated. He ran. And that brief moment of hesitation is the reason Melissa and Alyssa were still alive. When Dawn and James were arrested, the horror sharpened into something worse. Alyssa had been living in the custody of the very people tied to her father's death. Through it all, she kept believing in Melissa. And once the system allowed it, she was finally reunited with the woman who had fought to be her mother in every way that mattered. Years later, the case went to court. Evidence firmly supported James as the shooter, while Dawn's role, planning, manipulation, involvement, became harder to prosecute in the same direct way. Dawn ultimately avoided a murder conviction in exchange for cooperation, while James pled guilty and received life without parole. But what remains after the legal outcomes is something far heavier than a verdict. Alyssa lost her father, the person who anchored her world. Melissa lost her husband, and nearly lost the child she had promised to protect. And the story that began with police suspecting the wife ended with something far more disturbing. The person behind the scenes wasn't the woman in bed beside Ben. It was the one person who gained everything by his death. In the end, what saved Melissa wasn't a lucky break or a dramatic discovery. It was a child who paid attention, a 6-year-old who remembered a sound at the door, a shadow moving through the house, and the feeling that something wasn't right. And in a case built on assumptions, that small truth mattered more than anything else. A family torn apart by betrayal is one kind of tragedy. But what happens when someone vanishes without a body, without answers, without closure? Well, that takes us to August 8th, 2013, the night a man named Brandon Lawson vanished under circumstances that continue to puzzle both investigators and the public to this day. It all began after Brandon got into a heated argument with his longtime girlfriend, Alyssa Lofton, and feeling the need for space and a chance to cool off, he decided to leave the house and called his father to ask if he could drive 3 hours to stay the night at his place. Something his father tried to talk him out of, given how late it was. But Brandon, determined to get away, set off from his San Angelo home at 11:54 p.m., heading toward Crowley, Texas. Roughly 40 miles into the drive, his car ran out of gas and he was forced to pull over along a desolate stretch of Highway 277 near Bronte, Texas, after which he phoned his brother Kyle for help. When Kyle arrived shortly after, Brandon was no longer at the scene, and despite searching the area thoroughly, there was no trace of him anywhere. It wasn't until the next day that the family discovered something chilling. Just moments after speaking with Kyle, Brandon had placed a 911 call, one that would later become central to one of the most disturbing missing persons cases in recent memory. In that call, which you can hear now.
9/2013 0:50 and 38 seconds.
911 emergency.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. It's like we're just cruising guys over. Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. Got chasing to the woods. Please hurry.
Okay, now run that by me.
I'm not talking to him. I actually ran into him.
Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
Yeah, no, I need the cops.
Okay. Is anybody hurt? Hello? 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 Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
Brandon sounds panicked, disoriented, and clearly afraid, making fragmented statements that seem to suggest he is being chased or watched, saying things like, "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field," and "There's guys chasing me," with the call cutting in and out and leaving more questions than answers. Over the years, the audio has fueled countless theories, debates, and speculations online, yet to this day, there remains no clear explanation as to what happened that night. What makes this case especially troubling is that law enforcement initially hesitated to take it seriously. Due to outstanding warrants Brandon had at the time, police assumed he had voluntarily disappeared to avoid arrest and didn't prioritize the case, expecting him to resurface eventually. But he never did. His family, however, firmly believes that Brandon would never abandon his 4 children, and they have consistently rejected the idea that he fled on purpose. To many, the lack of urgency in the police response felt like the case was quietly pushed aside, and that sense of neglect only deepened the mystery. Listening to the desperation in Brandon's voice during that 911 call, it becomes painfully clear that he believed he was in danger. And what makes it even more unsettling is the strong impression that he wasn't alone during that final call. Being stranded in the middle of nowhere, in the dead of night, just 40 miles from home, with fear creeping into his every word. It leaves you wondering not just what happened, but how something like this could go unresolved for so long, with no solid answers and no closure for the people who knew and loved him. Sometimes danger whispers. Other times it arrives as a deafening crack that shakes the ground beneath you. In the early morning hours of October 15, 2005, a catastrophic train collision shook the quiet outskirts of Texarkana, Arkansas. 2 freight trains collided near Hobo Jungle Park, and one of them was carrying multiple tank cars filled with highly flammable propylene gas. The impact was violent enough to rupture several of those tank cars, releasing thousands of gallons of liquefied petroleum gas into the surrounding area. Within minutes, a dense vapor cloud began spreading across the ground, hugging the surface as these types of gases do, invisible in the dark except for what looked like a rolling fog. Officer Randy, a patrol officer with the Texarkana Police Department, happened to be nearby in his cruiser when he heard the collision. He described it as a massive explosive crack that echoed through the trees. As he drove toward the sound, his dash camera recorded something that would later become chilling evidence of how quickly disaster can unfold. What initially looked like early morning mist drifting across the roadway wasn't weather at all. It was a growing cloud of highly volatile gas moving silently through the neighborhood.
Explosion, Hobo Jungle. Completely engulfed in flames. Phil 90, all right?
Yeah, boy.
204 Central, we just had a huge explosion. We've got massive fire out here on Dudley here at the rail yard. All kinds of stuff on fire. Just lost power down here on the hill. 209, you might want to back your unit up.
Get your ass out of my way. Get the hell up out of here.
In the dashcam footage, you can see the tree line ahead slowly disappear behind the creeping vapor. Then, in a fraction of a second, the entire area erupts. The cloud reaches a nearby house and ignites instantly, triggering what investigators later identified as a vapor cloud explosion. The trees burst into flames almost simultaneously, and the home is consumed in a violent fireball. There's no gradual build, no warning. Just a sudden ignition as the gas finds a spark source, possibly from an appliance, a pilot light, or electrical current inside the structure. Officer Randy reacts immediately. You can see him throw the cruiser into reverse and accelerate backward, trying to escape the expanding fire front. The blast wave and intense heat could have easily reached his vehicle had he hesitated for even a few seconds. The explosion ultimately forced the evacuation of nearby homes and required response from multiple emergency agencies.
Pretty close call, because had I not gone with my gut feeling and my previous training, I would have driven right into that fog and may not be here to talk about it today.
Tragically, one person did lose his life that morning, the homeowner whose house ignited when the gas cloud entered it. Investigators later confirmed that the vapor had seeped into the structure before ignition occurred. It's a devastating reality to imagine, being inside your own home, unaware that an invisible, highly flammable gas has filled the air around you. Federal investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board later examined the collision and the chain of failures that led to it, including signal miscommunication and train positioning. The incident became a stark reminder of how dangerous hazardous material transport can be when something goes wrong, and how quickly an invisible threat can turn into a lethal inferno. It's one of those moments where dashcam footage doesn't just show an accident, it captures the split second between normalcy and catastrophe. And that takes us to a case you might recently heard about, but probably not with all the details I'm about to tell you. It was Sunday, December 14, 2025, when what should have been a peaceful evening at Bondi Beach turned into one of the darkest days in modern Australian history.
It is Australia's worst mass shooting in nearly 30 years.
Families and members of Sydney's Jewish community had gathered for a public Hanukkah celebration known as Chanukah by the Sea. Around 1,000 people were present, parents with children, elderly couples seated on folding chairs, teenagers laughing near the sand. It was meant to be a joyful night marking the first evening of Hanukkah. Bondi Beach, one of Australia's most recognizable coastal landmarks, is known for its bright mornings, crowded walkways, and sense of community. That evening, the atmosphere was calm. Music played softly, candles were prepared, the ocean moved gently in the background. No one expected violence. Then, just before 6:50 p.m., everything changed. A silver car pulled up near Campbell Parade, not far from the park behind the beach where the celebration was taking place. Two men stepped out and made their way toward a nearby footbridge overlooking Archer Park. From that elevated position, they suddenly opened fire into the crowd below. At first, some people thought the loud cracks might be fireworks, a reasonable assumption during a festive gathering. But within seconds, confusion turned to terror. People began screaming. Parents grabbed their children. Some ran blindly toward the sand, others toward nearby buildings. The sound of gunfire echoed across the park and shoreline. Panic spread in waves. Witnesses later described seeing people drop to the ground, others shielding loved ones with their bodies. Some bystanders shouted warnings, urging others to run. In those terrifying moments, survival instinct collided with courage. One man, later identified as Ahmed al-Ahmed, ran toward the danger instead of away from it. When one of the attackers paused to reload behind a tree, Ahmed seized the opportunity. He rushed forward, tackled the gunman from behind, and wrestled the weapon from his hands. For a brief moment, the attacker appeared stunned, and that split second likely saved lives. But the second shooter saw what was happening and opened fire again. Ahmed was struck multiple times and collapsed. He survived after emergency surgery and was later recognized as a hero for his actions. Acts of bravery unfolded across the scene. Lifeguards rushed to pull injured people out of exposed areas. A mother, despite being wounded, stayed conscious long enough to reassure her children. Strangers shielded children who weren't their own. Others provided first aid using whatever they could find. Police responded within minutes. Armed officers approached from multiple directions and quickly engaged the attackers. After a short but intense confrontation, both gunmen were neutralized. One killed at the scene and the other taken into custody after being seriously wounded. As officers secured the area, they discovered improvised explosive devices inside the attacker's vehicle. Bomb specialists later confirmed the devices were viable and could have caused even greater devastation if they had detonated. The human cost was immense. 15 people lost their lives, ranging from children to elderly adults. Dozens more were injured, including police officers who had rushed toward the gunfire. Many victims had been attending the Hanukkah celebration. Others were simply nearby, enjoying a Sunday evening at one of Australia's most famous beaches. Authorities classified the incident as a terrorist attack, citing evidence that the assault had been planned and motivated by hatred. Investigators later confirmed the attackers had prepared for the attack for months. In the aftermath, Bondi Beach, a place known for sunlight, community, and celebration, became a scene of grief. Vigils were held along the shoreline. Candles lined the park, blood donation centers filled with volunteers. Across Australia and beyond, people mourned together. What happened that night shattered a sense of safety many had long associated with Bondi. But amid the horror, the courage of ordinary people stood out. Strangers protecting strangers, civilians stepping forward to save lives, and a community refusing to let fear define it. Bondi Beach will forever remember December 14th, not only for the tragedy that unfolded, but for the bravery shown in its darkest hour. It unfolded in public, beneath an open sky. The next one, however, grew in the shadows of a small town that believed it was safe. In the spring of 2017, Cedar Falls felt like the kind of town where nothing truly bad ever happened. People recognized each other on Main Street. Stores closed early. Most crime was minor, until something strange started happening after hours. Local businesses began reporting mannequins missing from their window displays. No broken glass, no forced doors, no alarms going off. Whoever was doing it didn't rush either. In one case, security footage showed a hooded figure moving calmly, dismantling the display piece by piece, almost methodically, then leaving through a back area like they'd done it before. A few days later, those mannequins started turning back up, placed in public spaces like parks, near schools, and by roadside stops. And every time, there was the same detail: a precise red grid pattern painted across the face. It was unsettling in a way that was hard to explain. Not messy vandalism, not random graffiti. It looked deliberate, like a signature. Still, most people treated it like some creepy prank or guerrilla art. Police logged it as theft and vandalism. Odd, but not urgent. But someone wasn't making art. Someone was rehearsing. Rebecca Chen was 29 and managed a women's boutique downtown. She was known for being reliable. Same routine, same schedule. The kind of person who didn't just disappear. On the night of June 8, 2017, she closed the store and started her usual walk home, only a few minutes away. The next morning, she didn't show up to open. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her sister, Maria, pushed back against the idea that Rebecca might have just gone somewhere. She knew her sister's habits too well. A missing person report was filed immediately. Detectives traced the last confirmed camera sighting of Rebecca walking along Main Street. Then she entered a short section where the city cameras had been broken for months. It was a small gap, but it mattered. She went into that blind spot and never appeared again on any camera farther up the route. When police checked her apartment, the scene didn't match someone leaving voluntarily. It looked like she simply never arrived, no signs of her settling in for the night, and key personal items were missing in a way that suggested interruption, not planning. 2 days into the search, the case shifted from fear to certainty. A business owner opened a back storage room and found a staged scene involving those same missing mannequins. It wasn't just the presence of mannequins. It was the arrangement, the intentionality, the sense that someone had placed everything with care. Investigators also discovered the person responsible had returned to the scene more than once, not to take anything, but to adjust details, like they were finishing the display. That detail changed the entire profile. This wasn't impulsive. This was controlled. Someone wasn't just committing a crime. They were trying to create something, perfect something, and they felt safe enough to come back. The investigation started connecting dots. Multiple store owners who'd been hit by the mannequin thefts shared one overlap. Many of them had hired the same contractor for repairs or display work. He had legitimate access to buildings. He knew layouts, back entrances, and how to avoid attention. When police obtained a search warrant, they found a hidden workspace that brought the mannequin prank into horrifying context. Evidence that the thefts had been practice, and Rebecca had been the escalation. Faced with the evidence, the suspect admitted enough for investigators to widen the net. The case didn't end with just one victim. Once they understood the pattern, how long it had been developing, how practiced it was, police were able to connect him to additional murders and build a timeline that showed this wasn't a sudden break. It was a progression. In 2018, he was convicted and sentenced to multiple life terms. And Cedar Falls changed forever. Not because the town became dangerous overnight, but because people realized the truth. Sometimes the earliest warning signs don't look like a threat at all. Sometimes they look like something creepy that everyone jokes about, right up until it stops being a joke. Some tragedies are remembered for their brutality. Others are nearly forgotten, buried beneath censorship and history. On March 3, 1944, a freight train rolled toward a mountain tunnel near the town of Balvano in southern Italy. Officially, there were fewer than a dozen people on board, just crew. But Italy was at war, and nothing about daily life was normal anymore. By the time that train was discovered again, it would be tied to more than 500 deaths, one of the deadliest railway disasters ever recorded, and one that barely made the news at all. In 1944, Italy was fractured. The country had entered World War II under Mussolini, allied with Nazi Germany. Then everything collapsed into chaos. An armistice with the Allies, German retaliation, a puppet regime in the north, a kingdom in the south, and fighting threaded through the country like a second war inside the first. Supplies were scarce, and civilian life was treated as expendable compared to troop movements and military shipments. Passenger train tickets were hard to get, and for many people, there simply wasn't another way to travel. So civilians did what desperate people always do. They adapted. Food in the cities, especially places like Naples, was thin. Farmers had produce, meat, dairy. City residents had access to goods that could be traded, sometimes acquired from Allied troops: coffee, cigarettes, items that could buy food when money meant little. But getting to the countryside required travel, and travel required trains. With passenger lines restricted, people began climbing onto freight trains and hiding among wagons. It was illegal. Everyone knew it. But authorities often looked the other way because the alternative was unrest, hunger, and riots. Certain routes even earned their own nickname: Black Market Express lines, unofficial lifelines for civilians trying to keep their families alive. Another shortage made these trains even more dangerous: coal. Many locomotives still ran on coal, and coal quality had deteriorated under wartime strain. Train crews burned whatever they could find, sometimes poor quality coal that generated less power and released more poisonous carbon monoxide. Just weeks before Balvano, a driver on the same route had been overwhelmed by fumes in a tunnel, fainted, and died. It was treated as an isolated tragedy. No major changes were made. Then came Train 8017. On March 2, 1944, a freight train departed Naples pulling 45 goods wagons. On paper, it was cargo. In reality, it was also human desperation packed into dark compartments, clinging to couplings, wedged between crates. Nearly 500 unofficial passengers, possibly more. Around 7 p.m., the train reached Battipaglia, where the electric engine used out of Naples was swapped out for steam locomotives needed for the non-electrified mountain sections ahead. More people joined during the stop. By the time it left, some estimates suggest there may have been as many as 700 stowaways on board. Near midnight, the train stopped briefly at Balvano Rico Station for maintenance. Then it began the climb toward the Army Tunnel, an uphill stretch through the Apennine Mountains with steep grades that demanded serious pulling power. Thick fog surrounded the line as the train crawled toward the tunnel entrance at around 15 kilometers per hour. The tunnel itself was about 1.8 kilometers long, with poor ventilation, exactly the kind of place where coal smoke and carbon monoxide could build and linger. Normally, staff at the station on the far side would send a signal back once the train had passed through safely. That night, no signal came. What likely happened next wasn't dramatic in the way people imagine disasters. It was mechanical strain, bad fuel, and physics working slowly against a train that was simply too heavy. The incline was about 1.3%. The rails may have been wet, causing the wheels to slip even as sandboxes were used to increase traction. The engine struggled, and sometime around 2 a.m., train 8017 stopped inside the tunnel, with nearly all the wagons trapped in the darkness. Minutes earlier, another train had already passed through, leaving the air inside thick with smoke. Ventilation was poor. Now, as the crew attempted to restart the engines, more carbon monoxide poured into the confined space. The passengers, many asleep, didn't have the chance to understand what was happening. Carbon monoxide is invisible and odorless. It doesn't announce itself. It simply replaces oxygen, and people drift into unconsciousness before panic even has time to form. At the front of the train, the drivers were the first to lose consciousness. There was another fatal complication. The train had multiple locomotives, but the crews could not communicate effectively through the tunnel. When the front drivers tried to reverse the train out, downhill, those at the rear assumed the movement was an uncontrolled slide backward. They applied the brakes. The train fought itself, trapped in a tight space, engines still venting poison into air that could not clear. Some passengers did manage to get off the train and run along the tracks toward fresh air, but most collapsed before they reached the tunnel mouth. The bodies were later found along the rails, in clusters, evidence of last attempts that simply ran out of oxygen. Eventually, a brakeman at the rear, Michel Polo, understood the seriousness of what was unfolding. He disembarked and ran back to Balvano station to get help. He arrived around 5:10 a.m., far too late for most of the people inside the tunnel. Rescue efforts were chaotic. Another train was sent to pull 8017 out, but couldn't even reach it at first. The tracks were littered with bodies. It took nearly 3 hours to remove the dead and clear a path through the tunnel. The official death toll was recorded as 517, but some indications suggest the number may have been higher, possibly 626 in the immediate aftermath. Many of the victims were laid out at the station before being moved to the cemetery and buried hurriedly in mass graves. Only 235 were ever positively identified. The crew received formal burials. Most passengers did not. And perhaps the most haunting detail isn't the number, though it's staggering. It's how little the world heard about it. Strict wartime censorship was in place. The Allies feared civilian morale would collapse. Italian authorities wanted distance from a tragedy that spoke plainly of scarcity, neglect, and breakdown. The disaster went largely unreported. It wasn't until 1951 that a parliamentary commission investigated what happened, by which time much of the physical evidence was gone. No one was prosecuted. The official cause was pinned on poor quality coal, an easy explanation in a war where blame could be spread thin and accountability disappeared into necessity. In the end, the victims were classified as casualties of war, and in a way, they were. Not because a bomb fell on them, not because they were caught in crossfire, but because war breaks more than buildings and armies. It breaks systems, priorities, and normal life. It forces people onto freight trains in the middle of the night, into tunnels without ventilation, into risks they never would have taken in peacetime. And sometimes, it kills them quietly, in their sleep before they even realize anything is wrong. Now that was all for today, folks. If you enjoyed these horrifying clips, click to see more on the video on screen.